This is Set Him Free, Chapter 5. Virgil was greeted with the sound of screeching as he entered the cottage. He followed the sound, quickly reaching its source. In the middle of the kitchen stood a turtle dove and a chicken, both squawking out of control, while Remus simply scolded them both. It was hard to make out over the unbearable shrieking, though Virgil could understand a few of the sentences Remus shouted. Eileen, you gotta give him a chance. Chickens are one of the most beautiful bird species to exist. Have you seen that beak? What do you mean he has no personality? You have no idea what you're talking about, Eileen. Pierre, I swear, if you shed your feathers as much as one more time, I will personally cook you. Virgil hesitantly stepped forward, catching Remus's attention. The other's head shot up, and a grin appeared on his face. Ah, Virgil, you're home. Yeah, I am. I'm not interrupting anything, am I? Remus waved a dismissive hand. Not at all. He swept his arm across the kitchen counter, pushing both the chicken and turtle dove off with a final squawk. I was merely playing matchmaker for the lovely Eileen over here. Unfortunately, I don't think she or Pierre are going to find that special someone anytime soon. That's too bad. Indeed it is. Remus's gaze trailed to the floor, where Pierre and Eileen were currently running around the kitchen table. So, how was your morning out? Bittersweet, Virgil mumbled, cutting a small slice of bread from the loaf on the counter. All the running he had done within the span of the morning had left him starving. Did you get the stuff Janny asked for? No. Ooh, Janice is going to be furious. Better yet, disappointed, Remus cackled, and Virgil scowled. It wasn't my fault. I got stopped by... Virgil paused. He wasn't so sure that he wanted to inform Remus that he had almost been arrested. Not that the older wouldn't find it absolutely hilarious, but he could guarantee Janice would be told no matter how much he asked to keep a secret. Though Remus may have been good for many things, keeping quiet was not one of them, and Virgil did not feel like being scolded for getting caught. He quickly formed an excuse, knowing that as long as Remus believed him, he could still semi-convince Janice. The owner. I was stopped by the owner. The owner? Yeah. I was in the shop and I heard the silversmith waking up. I hadn't found the items yet and figured it wasn't worth being found. Remus began to laugh. Seriously? You were scared of a silversmith? I would have kept going anyway. I might as well have someone experience my expertise. Who cares if I would end up in a dungeon? They've got incredible cockroaches in there. You have no sense of self-preservation, do you? Nope. I like to live life on the edge. Of a giant cliff, that is. Virgil rolled his eyes, licking the last breadcrumbs from his fingers. The sweet yet spiced dough was a creation of Janice's, and despite Remus and Virgil's constant begging, the inventor refused to share the recipe. To further enforce this, he would only bake the bread when the other two were away, surprising them every so often. These days were especially remarkable, as they were a rare occurrence. Virgil reached for another slice, stopping himself just before his fingers touched the plate. It wouldn't be wise to consume the whole loaf within a day, no matter how much he craved the spiced bread. He tried to distract his mind from hunger, noticing their friend's absence for the first time. Hey, where is Janice anyway? I think he said something about going into town to barter for vegetables, though it was kind of hard to tell since I was in the middle of a screaming match with Pierre. Remus grinned. I ended up winning, by the way. Of course you did. Virgil pinched the bridge of his nose. Does that mean we've already run out of food again? I guess so. I remember Jan mentioning something about missing those green leafy things and that red stuff. About half the cabinets are empty at this point. The three weren't the most well-off in the kingdom, causing food to be scarce. Any meals were preserved as long as possible, allowing Janus to scrape up just enough money to travel to the market each week. He used the profits from his inventions to purchase the bare necessities, though his creations often needed parts too costly for them to obtain, leading to Virgil's job. Virgil took a seat by the kitchen counter, dropping his head on the hard wood with a thud. It was too early in the morning to be dealing with existence. He rested his head in his arms, shutting his eyes even though he knew he wouldn't be able to actually fall asleep. Just another fun perk that accompanied anxiety and overthinking. Somehow, he had managed to enter a kind of peaceful in-between, but this was quickly destroyed as the front door swung open. A finger began to poke him continually, and it took all of his internal strength not to slap Remus right then and there. Instead, he lifted his head and scowled at the older with all the annoyance he could muster. Remus simply laughed, ruffling Virgil's hair and bouncing on his heels. "Wakey, wakey, Virg! We've got company!" "Oh, joy," Virgil grumbled, frowning as he fixed his hair and pulled his bangs back in front of his face. "Now, Virgil, that's no way to treat your companions, is it?" A sly voice flowed from around the corner. "I thought you were only the provider of our necessities," Virgil smirked. "Nice to see that we've upgraded to companions." Janus emerged in the doorway, a wicker basket held in his arms. Strolling over to the others, he dropped the basket onto the table, placing a small sheet of parchment beside it. "I believe you both will be glad to know I had enough money to gain extra food this week. As a special treat, I've decided that I'll make pumpkin soup soon to celebrate the oncoming season." The inventor pulled out a small pumpkin from within the basket, its twirling vines cascading off the table. A few fruits and vegetables emerged from the container in addition, lastly followed by 6 eggs. "Wait, if we're having pumpkin soup, does that mean—" "Yes, Remus, I will allow you to carve it." "Yes!" The boy clad in green and black cheered, immediately snatching up paper and pencil to excitedly sketch. "Incisions will be placed here, and here, and here." While their friend obsessed over future dinner plans, Janus turned to Virgil. A more serious expression emerged on his face, and he quietly beckoned for Virgil to join him in the next room. The younger obliged, and followed him until they were surrounded by Janus's various inventions. Janus sat in front of his workbench, beginning to tinker before addressing the one before him. "So, were you successful in retrieving the items I asked for?" "No." Janus glanced up from his work. "I beg your pardon?" "The silversmith. He was awake at the same moment I entered the shop. I would have been caught if I stayed any longer." Virgil braced himself for the older's response. Janus would see right through his lie for sure. He was not in the mood for another lecture. "I see." Janus allowed the words to roll off his tongue, enveloping the room in an uncertain silence. Finally, he spoke. "That is quite all right." "What?" "What?" A second voice echoed from behind Virgil as Remus stumbled from behind the doorway. "Remus, what did I tell you about eavesdropping?" "You can't blame me. You're supposed to take away his brooding privileges or something, but of course you have to be all boring." Janus rubbed his temples. "Remind me again why I decided to take care of you two nightmares." "You know, I'm honestly not quite sure. Maybe because of our wonderful personalities." "Remus." Fine, I'm going," Remus huffed. "But first, did you know that regal horned lizards repel attackers by squirting blood from their eyes?" Out! Already gone! Janice released an irritated sigh as the door finally clicked shut. Picking his latest project up, he began tweaking the small creation. Virgil glimpsed at him quizzically, though the elder did nothing to clarify the means to the situation. After a few moments occupied by nothing other than the clinking of metals, Janice stood from his workbench. He approached Virgil, the thief nervously fiddling with the bandages on his leg. Impassive yellow-green eyes stared into his own, reflected by an equally reserved expression. Virgil felt like shattering then and there. However, Janice's face swiftly shifted into a smile, one appearing oddly genuine. "Now," he said, "back to what I was informing you of before we were so pleasantly interrupted. There is no need for you to fret over not retrieving today's items. In fact, disregard it altogether." "Come again?" "You heard me, Virgil. At this time, there are greater things to consider, things that you will have an essential part in completing." "Such as?" Virgil raised an eyebrow. "Patience, my young friend. Tomorrow morning you will retrieve an assortment of new parts I require from this location." He handed Virgil a layout of a local blacksmithing forge. "From that point, you will meet Remus and I farther down the streets, within the 5th alleyway. Do I make myself clear?" Virgil glanced over the parchment he had been handed. "Janice, I hate to be inquisitive, but what is this all for? Do you seriously not trust me just because I messed up one job?" "Of course not. I believe quite the opposite of you, Virgil, which is exactly why I need you to do this for me." Janice plucked the paper from Virgil's hand, carefully folding it and closing it within the latter's fingers. "I need you to trust me, all right? You have been at my side for years, yet somehow you still doubt me. I may not be able to explain everything just yet, but I need you to believe me when I say there is a purpose." Little did Virgil know that the same morning, an insignificant paper had brushed against the castle gates. An insignificant paper detailing a possible illegal act heard to occur the very next day. An insignificant paper that, maybe, wasn't so insignificant. "Okay," Virgil spoke softly, looking down to the parchment folded within his fingers, before bringing his eyes to meet Janice's. "I trust you, and I always will. You and me. Against the world," Janice recited. Virgil smiled, tucking the paper into his belt. He gave a small nod, then quietly wandered out of the room to leave Janice to his work. The inventor watched Virgil leave, taking note of how his cloak brushed past his feet as he walked. The same cloak that had been absent only a day before. "How peculiar," he hummed to himself, retrieving several small wrenches and wandering to his workbench. "How peculiar indeed." This has been Set Him Free, Chapter 5. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week for Chapter 6.